What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the AMS Podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Michael Soto, discussing things about films past, present, and future. And I've seen in the past talk about not just movies, but specific things. And if I'll leave a list of them, I've mentioned popular movie characters, um, action characters. And today's episode, as you can see right next to me, I'm going to talk about bad guys, bad girls, villains, movie villains. And when I get asked the question of or think of movie villains, I see movie villains in the sense of it being why are they so popular or why in just overall in general that you see the sense of it being um I don't know, it's just kind of in the sense of I myself root for the good guy, but to those who are watching this episode, you prefer rooting for the bad guy because in most sense you the bad guy thinks that they're right, their methods are right, and they're the ones that we don't want to win, but eventually do win and see the flaws of the good guy. And I'll kind of minimize myself here for a second. We have some popular ones here from movie franchises, and you could definitely name them in different ways or the different sense. Currently, one of the legendary villains since 1977 is none other than Darth Vader, and I've seen videos of behind the scenes. You hear his theme song, and all you just see is this tall figure with a breathing sound, and he's just looks scary and ominous. And in film franchise history, he becomes one of those that has been gaining the popularity, and people, moviegoers, became fans of his. Then you have Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs, different portrayals of the Joker, but to some that come to mind, you have Heath Ledger's, excuse me, portrayal of the Joker, which he did it different from Jack Nicholson, Jared Leto, and currently right now, which is in production, Joaquin Phoenix version of the Joker. Then you have Thanos from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Tom Hardy's Bane. And those two, as I just referenced, are comic book portrayals. And we have the comic book fans seeing these portrayals of these comic book characters placed into movie form, and they feel like their methods are right and they take down the heroes in those sense. And then you have Lord Voldemort, a popular film villain as well from the popular film books, and hence why so bad. As you can see, just so many different, vast majority of movie villains from different forms of genre, fantasy, sci-fi, science fiction, and we just we sometimes kind of see their viewpoint, but in the end we don't want them to know that they were right or succeed in the end, but in most cases they do succeed. So if I were to say, and if you've seen previous episodes as we talk about particular characters, top ones for me that come to mind are, I'm gonna give love to all the Jokers, but you don't have to agree with what I say. Like I've said in the past, movies are subjective, and I would say Heath Ledger's Joker. Then you have Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin or Norman Osborn. Then I would go with Darth Vader, Thanos, I would definitely go with J.K. Simmons. I drew a blank on his name, but if you all have seen the movie Whiplash, he is one major a-hole in that and a proper movie villain. And we're about to go through a list, and I'm already drawing a blank on movie villains, and some of these movie villains are just as important or impactful in what they do throughout the movie, because you'll enjoy the movie as you're watching it, and they do something that leaves you like, oh, you just want them to fail. And even the first Terminator, as I see there on my images. But let's go through a list of by Insider and see how they rank each of these proper movie villains. And they're going to give about 50. So we're going to go through the list. Silly ads. And at number 51, we have Biff Tannen, Back to the Future franchise. You all have seen this movie. If you all have, like I said, seen these movies, Biff has always just been that bully and a proper of movie villain, thus to say the least. And Gary Oldman is always, and like I've said in the past, some of these movies I haven't seen, but let me know if you agree with the way this listing is. Norman Stansfield, Leon the Professional. Gary Oldman has always played some pretty good villains. Emperor Palpatine, a Star Wars franchise. He kind of is the mysterious. He uses Darth Vader as a muscle per se, and just I definitely kind of put him on a list. Hans Gruber, the Die Hard, very first Die Hard, even though, okay, it's going to be a spoiler alert a little, he's only given one film. His impact against Bruce, played by the late Alan Rickman, even though his impact is just kind of a back and forth with Bruce Willis, the predicaments he puts him in, I would say definitely one of those legendary Hollywood movie villains that leaves the action hero of how is he going to get out of this mess. And to anyone who is a fan of this film, Silence of the Lamb, you have Anthony Hopkins as a Hannibal Lecter, but you also have Ted Levin as Buffalo Bill. And Silence of the Lambs is one of those eerie, just suspenseful type films, and definitely a proper movie villain. Then Staff Sergeant Barnes in Platoon. You have Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest. Damien from The Omen, which looks like it's the original Omen. Hida Carlson, Single White Female. As I go through the list, I'm not going to go into specifics, but just knowing the history of it. And here's showing the appreciation for Green Goblin / Norman Osborn by Willem Dafoe in the first Spider-Man and just recently in Spider-Man No Way Home. Then we have Alex in Clockwork Orange. I'm going to have to try one day just to sit down, but played by Malcolm McDowell, that this film is not one for the faint of heart, because the certain moments that's given in the movie kind of leaves you on edge and eerie per se by the end of the film. Amy Dune, Gone Girl by Rosamund Pike. Seeing this film, this is a different genre, and just the gist of what this character does in this movie to Ben Affleck's character, you can definitely see her actions and things in that. Harry Powell in the Night of the Hunter. Not familiar with this film, but once I go through each of them, please let me know if you've all seen this. Miss Armitage. I believe I said that right, but Get Out is a very good film overall. And what Daniel Kaluuya has to face in this with this entire family is she pretty much this scene right here. If you've seen it or if you haven't, just YouTube this scene, Get Out. I believe it's the tea scene. It's just eerie, and you just feel for Daniel Kaluuya to just get out of the predicament that he's in, and just overall, just fascinating, just storytelling. Hell 9000, 2001: A Space Odyssey, a computer as a villain, and this is definitely on my watch list of films I need to hurry up and catch up on. There's a lot of films. Margaret White Carey, which I believe is yes, the mother, not Carrie herself. Maybe she'll get referenced in here. And Chucky, of course. We go to just not just villains overall, but now the horror type villains. And the very first Child's Play is definitely one that obviously we know the playful versions of toys. This is not the playful version of a toy. They have a killer doll and that wants to hurt you. I'll say that in the least. Definitely one of those. Then you have Gordon Gekko by Michael Douglas in Wall Street. Baby Jane Hudson on Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Then we have Mr. Denzel Washington, which definitely this role is one of his famous roles as Alonzo Harris in Training Day. Very good film. And if you know Denzel Washington's career, his work of art is definitely up there in the category of echelon, and he gave it his heart and all to complete this. As we proceed, another horror villain, Mr. Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Don't go to sleep or you won't run into Freddy Krueger. And played by Mr. Robert Englund, definitely a classic horror villain. And I would assume on this list we'll end up getting more horror villains. Nurse Ratched, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I believe this is definitely a very popular book/film because, as it says, a novel by Louis Fletcher, and which this actress earned an Oscar for her role. Then we go to the T-1000 in Terminator 2 franchise by Robert Kirkman, I believe. No, I don't want to mispronounce his name. Bear with me for just a second. Yeah, no, sorry, Robert Patrick. Robert Patrick. And he does very few lines, but his actions in the movie are basically is what leaves you in suspense, and him trying to fight against the Terminator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then we have a Quentin Tarantino type villain, Calvin Caddy, Django Unchained. This is definitely one of those that his actions and what he does in this film definitely is a villain you love to hate, and especially of what Quentin Tarantino did for Django Unchained. Gollum, yeah, I would say from the Lord of the Rings franchise, first started out as kind of a protagonist, then became an antagonist because all he wanted was that one simple ring, and he got what he wanted by the end of the film franchise, and I'll leave it at that. And done masterfully by Andy Serkis, who does motion capture. And just Google Andy Serkis, Gollum. He's literally wearing a suit with dots on his face, and they put all of that on him to make him look like this. Very good actor slash director and motion capture artist. And Morton Joe, Mad Max Fury Road. When I remember watching this the first time, he was not as impactful, but yes, he is a villain in the movie. Because he's trying to take down Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy's characters. But yeah, it's one of those I would have moved certain people above this on it. But like I said, you might disagree with me or you might not. Let's go. Here we go. Another villain from a horror franchise, Mr. Michael Myers. Doesn't speak, walks when I first watched, yes, all these classic horror films were popular as they were now, and they to me they should have ended or not rebooted, and then hence why they did like 10 of them, and then they did another reboot bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis, then doing two more films. So when you first watch it, if you've never seen the Halloween franchise, it's basically Michael Myers walking about 10 miles an hour and still being able to kill people. But overall, I'm just kind of messing around. It's definitely one of those that he's left an impact on the films that have been based around him. And then now we have a book franchise character, Harry Potter of Lord Voldemort. I know there's Harry Potter fans out there, and overall, what the books eventually did leading up to, I believe it's Ralph Fiennes, if I probably said that right. Um, Ralph Ralph Fiennes, and leading towards the end, he does the proper job of portraying this villainous character, trying to take down the boy who lived, Harry Potter himself. And I would definitely see that in the top of the list. Let's keep going. Predator, a fictional character, and definitely one, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, you were one ugly MFer. So definitely a villain that has been around to face off. Then we have Annie Wilkes, Misery. I've seen this film, and definitely one of those that, yeah, she's pretty cruel and evil to what she does in this movie. Then we start going into the top 7. Uh, One of those films that leaves you just a twisted performance, and with just only brief screen time. Now we start going into the top 20. Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th franchise, another villain, doesn't talk, but only gives you his impact by his actions. And obviously, previous horror villains, you'll know just by what he has in his hand. Then we have Thanos from the Avengers franchise. He was teased in the beginning and certain parts of the Marvel movies. Then, as he finally slowly started to make his impact, when you got him in Avengers Infinity War, then Avengers Endgame, he was able to match up with all these heroes. And then, as he finally met his match in Avengers Endgame, so definitely a movie villain slash popular comic book villain to all my comic book readers out there, but one of those that is definitely has gained the recognition of being in the top of Hollywood villains. Then we have another creature the alien from the Alien franchise. Went up against Sigourney Weaver herself and tried to kick the alien's ass as much as she could. And definitely one of those suspenseful things of trying to escape, hence the name Alien. Or if not, you would want it to kill you because of future alien baby would come out of your chest. Now we start going into, we're getting closer to the top echelon of movie villains. Phyllis Dickerson, Double Indemnity. Not familiar with, I probably butchered that. Kaiser Sose, another one by Kevin Spacey, The Usual Suspects. I know a few people who really like that film overall. Then we have Hans Landen, Inglorious Bastards. I would definitely say that this very first, if you've seen this movie, Christopher Waltz does a phenomenal job. I would have before I started this list, I would definitely say or give the recognition to this character because of the very first scene in this movie. If you haven't seen it or if you want to see it, just Google, YouTube the opening scene and just the impact. It's just a conversation between a character. Leave it at that. But overall, just the eeriness and the tension that he does with this. And he does some other lightful stuff, but still in a villain way. But I'll leave it at that. I would give Hans Landen a top tier villainy on my part. And here we go. Another um, movie villain, Leatherface. Doesn't do much talking, but uses a tool to and his actions to leave an impact. And obviously, you see the chainsaw. You know what I mean by that. And Tyler Durden, Fight Club. Before I had seen the movie, I was like, okay, kind of see the gist of it, but no spoilers. Then you're like, all right, now I get it. It's one of those where it's a thinker at first, but realizing how the movie ends, then you come to see and realize what it ends up being and stuff. So maybe you might not agree with me, but in the sense of it being, um, this could be switched off for other people that were put above this. And we have, of course, nothing against people that work as clowns in every day, but none other than Pennywise, the It franchise. And I believe I've heard from people in the past or on the webs that the series was a lot creepier, done by Tim Curry. Then Bill Skarsgård did his interpretation of it, and it was also creepy as well. I enjoyed the first It as opposed to the second one, but the way the It character leaves the psychological fear in the hearts of these children then to become adults later, it's definitely one that I could definitely see getting the praise of um greatest movie villains. And then now we're getting the top tier. We have the Wicked Witch of the West, the Wizard of Oz. And back then, kind of like Jaws, for example, it's one of those classic movie villains that we were to the people that saw this at this time were possibly afraid or kind of just saw the side of the Wicked Witch of the West. I can't speak. So definitely one of those for generations and tries to get Dorothy and her little dog. And now we go to the top 10. Mr. Porter, It's a Wonderful Life. Norman Bates, Psycho. I had seen Psycho in parts, and once I took a college course on Alfred Hitchcock, I saw it fully through, and you know the gist of what Alfred Hitchcock was going for, and overall, basically, if you've been to Universal Studios Hollywood, I know the reasoning, or you take that tram at the park and you see Norman Bates doing what he's doing, you're like, okay, you can definitely put Norman Bates up there as a movie villain. And I looked it up, and they ended up making, I think, three more films. This is one of those kind of like that it should have stopped at one, but you've heard me from the past say, excuse me, that once once you have a popular IPA, Hollywood is going to take a chance and make more films. Then we have Alex Forrest, Fatal Attraction by Glenn Close. And of course, the Terminator himself, I'll be back. Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger. James Cameron went from doing like a horror style film, a sci-fi film of a killer robot trying to kill a woman from having her son John Connor be born. Then that killer robot becomes a guardian protecting then John Connor from another killer robot. So definitely Arnold Schwarzenegger did the proper introduction of introducing this robot version of this character. And then Amon Goth, Schindler's List. This is definitely one that is kind of like Clockwork Orange because of what this film is based on, that I'm going to have to just sit down and probably, I've been told once you see it, you're like, ugh, okay. It's one of those that you acknowledge the importance of and the significance, but another one done by Ralph Fiennes, and it just leaves you in the eerie sense, and overall, just you just feel. Obviously, if you all have seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Now we're going into the top tier, the final, and of course, I referenced Jaws and the shark itself, Jaws. And once this movie was released back then, I've heard in the past or seen videos that it left people just afraid of the water at the time. But for myself, I've acknowledged on previous podcast episodes, you need to acknowledge the past. And the shark doesn't come out till almost towards the end of the film. And because John Williams, the composer, leaves you in the suspense. I'm not going to play the music here, but the two keys, the dun dun dun, and that music alone left audiences in suspense because of in actual real life there is the dealings of shark attacks, and definitely one of those movie villains. They've referenced two different types of alien species in a computer. So their insider here is going to give props to Bruce in Jaws, Bruce himself. And now we're at the Mount Rushmore, Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs by Anthony Hopkins. This film is one of those that's suspenseful, leaves you on the edge of your seat, and as it says here, Buffalo Bill's pretty bad, but Anthony Hopkins' dialogue is just one of those that's like, oh man, you just like, you hate this guy. But they needed their help to find Buffalo Bill in the movie. And now we're at the final three. Anton Chigurh, No Country for Old Men by Javier Bardem. This is one of those that Javier Bardem gets dialogue in the movie, but His actions are what leaves you knowing that yes, he is a movie villain, and it's one of those that is possibly become, as out of these 50 that have been on this list, a very popular film character, movie character of all time. And as I stated in the beginning of this video or this episode podcast, the Joker is a very popular comic book character. It's been around for almost 80 years, as long as the Cape Crusader Batman. And each actor that has portrayed the Joker is one of those that has done their own interpretation. Cesar Romero, um, from the Batman with Adam West. Then you had Jack Nicholson. Now Heath Ledger, Jared Leto. I just missed. I said it again. And then Joaquin Phoenix. And overall, they've all done their different interpretations. And just I kind of see this Joker in here particular, because of it is literally a chess match with Christian Bale's Batman and what his methods are, and seeing if this Batman in this film he's able to stoop to his level and his ways. And it's one of those, you can't have Batman without the Joker. Definitely a proper movie villain. And the number one movie villain, according to Insider, is none other than Darth freaking Vader. I could see at the time of the original trilogy back in 1977, the Empire Strikes Back, the cliffhanger, then the redemption story at the end, or I won't spoil it if you haven't seen the Star Wars movies, but the ending arc for Darth Vader, and he is later on grown to become such a popular character that has left just movie audiences enthralled on what you see. And it's definitely just for me, as you obviously have known in past videos, episodes, comic book fan at heart, but what has been a part of my movie fanatic experience or just love for films overall has been the Star Wars franchise. And I give a shout out to my aunt who gave me, if it wasn't for her giving me, maybe you all have them, the golden VHSs of the original Star Wars, starting with A New Hope, Empire, then Return of the Jedi. If I didn't have those, I wouldn't have this passion for just all these different things, and overall the love for film and storytelling. I've read books on Star Wars, conquering the world, and it just being such a popular franchise overall. And just it's one of those that's this character will definitely live on and is synonymous to Hollywood filmmaking overall. And you go on social media, you'll see kids nowadays of when they see the classic lines of Luke, I am your father, or from um the prequel trilogy, oh my gosh, Revenge of the Sith, um of them finding people finding out that Anakin becomes Darth Vader, because the younger generation started off, well, I was a part of that, but the Gen X, Gen Y, or whatever you call it, it becomes that just this is one of those popular movie villains that has just ended up going into learning about what it takes and things like that. So I would just say overall, this has been one of those that movie villains are just as popular as the heroes. And thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what are your favorite movie villains. Check out previous episodes of the AMS podcast. I am discussing things about films past, present, and future. I'm your host, Adrian Michael Soto. I'll see y'all next time. Bye bye for now.